Hey, this is Josh with Cultural Catholic coming at you with another Domestic Friday. Before I get into all of the two stories I have today, I just want to say those who may watch this and are in the path of Hurricane Irma, please listen to all authorities and evacuate. Do not stay where you are. Don't listen to Rush Limbaugh or any of his crazy cronies who are saying it's a hoax. Please do find shelter. Please find safety. My thoughts are with you guys because even though it's downgraded to a category 4, it's still a very dangerous situation. So please stay safe. All right, so the two stories I have today are involving the travel ban and Betsy DeVos's recent decision on sexual assault guidelines. So to start out, the Associated Press reports a federal appeals court on Thursday rejected the Trump administration's limited view of who is allowed into the United States under the president's travel ban, saying grandparents, cousins, and similarly close relations of people in the U.S. should not be prevented from coming to the country. The unanimous ruling from three judges on the San Francisco-based Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals also cleared the way for refugees accepted by a resettlement agency to travel here. The decision upheld a ruling by a federal judge in Hawaii who found the administration's view to be too strict. So I actually talked a bit about this earlier when that Hawaii decision came out, and I agree with the refugee resettlement and the expansion of who is a bona fide relation is actually a good idea. I mean, come on, grandparents. How are they a security risk? They're grandparents. They're like the old people who really love love kids and will give you like candy and crap. Of course, that's just my own cultural understanding, but grandparents are a legitimate relation. And the fact that in-laws were accepted, but not cousins, uncles, aunts, and grandparents, that didn't really make much sense. And I think that this is a good decision. Going forward in the article, make sure. Just making sure I have the right one up here. The Justice Department said it would appeal. The Supreme Court has stepped in to correct these lower courts before, and we will now return to the Supreme Court to vindicate the executive branch's duty to protect the nation, the agency said in a statement. The U.S. Supreme Court said in June that President Donald Trump's 90-day ban on visitors from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen can be enforced pending arguments scheduled for October, partially overturning lower court rulings. But the justices said it should not apply to visitors who have a bona fide relationship with people or organizations in the U.S., such as close family ties or a job offer. And of course, the administration was very narrow in its interpretation of a bona fide relationship, basically cutting out the organization part altogether. Going on, the government interpreted such family relations including immediate family members and in-laws, but not grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. The judge in Hawaii overruled the interpretation, expanding the definition of who can enter the country to other categories of relatives. He also overruled the government's assertion that refugees from those countries should be banned even if a resettlement agency in the U.S. had agreed to take them in. The administration argued that resettlement agencies have a relationship with the government, not with individual refugees. The appeals court rejected that, focusing on the harm the travel ban might impose on people or organizations in the U.S. And it goes on to explain that these resettlement agencies, they go through all of these steps. And earlier in the article, it said that a lot of mitigating factors such as travel and its relation to various steps that refugees have to go to are very time sensitive. So creating this barrier is it was deemed to not have validity in the ruling in regards to these other family members and resettlement agencies specifically. So yeah, this is overturned. It'll obviously go to the Supreme Court, but I think it will hopefully stand. This ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court, which is reputed to be more liberal than the other circuit courts, but with the 5-4 slant towards the right, I don't know. It could go one way, but which is not good for refugees, but it could be good for refugees in the long run. I don't know. I am not a psychic who can see into the future, but yeah. And now moving on to Betsy DeVos. I'm going to actually have a few other things linked. For instance, part of the reason. So the Betsy DeVos story is going to be about the 2011 guidelines that the Obama Education Department set forward for investigating and dealing with sexual assault on campus. I'm going to include the Dear Colleague letter, article from The Atlantic on how, while this change was much needed, there are some issues still, which I completely understand, and I'm a little iffy with DeVos rescinding the directive because I'm not certain she's going to end up having a directive that is impartial to the point that it actually allows an effective investigation. And I'm also going to include a Sports Illustrated article on Baylor, and it's known for its very big, for its large sexual assault issues, especially with its football team, which is also partially what prompted these directives, as well as many other schools that had these issues. So, all right. Politico reported yesterday that Education Secretary Betsy DeVos said Thursday that she will rescind an Obama-era schools directive on sexual assault and develop a replacement that she said would do a better job of balancing the rights of victims and the accused. The truth is that the system established by the prior administration has failed too many students, DeVos said during a half-hour speech at George Mason University, where she took no questions. Survivors, victims of a lack of due process, and campus administrators have all told me that the current approach does a disservice to everyone involved. The directive, it had its issues, it's fairly straightforward. It's asking for someone to be, for these, and it was fairly gender neutral, but the statistics do favor women being the ones more often than not sexually assaulted. It demanded that someone be put in place to follow Title IX directives, and it put sexual assault into under the jurisdiction of Title IX, which is a 1972 law that dictates that education should not be discriminated against based on sex, basically gender. And it also said that it also changed slightly the definition of sexual assault. But I think it did in a way that was like inclusive, to yet fairly narrow enough to not be overly malicious, and not that it fixed the problem, it did offer some possible solutions, but some schools just then took it to the nth degree with some issues, as with this issue, as the Atlantic article points out, and also the Political article points out at points. I agree that sexual assault is a very serious issue on campuses. I'm just not sure Betsy DeVos is going to come at it from a point of view that will benefit sexual assault survivors. Her director of the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, seemed very flippant when she stated that most sexual assault and rape allegations on campus are not real. So I am very concerned. Going on with the Politico article, the 2011 Obama guidance for the first time pushed school district, college, and university leaders to combat sexual harassment, including sexual violence, saying the institutions were required to do so under Title IX, a federal law that prohibits sex discrimination. Women's groups hailed that as a crucial step in cracking down on sexual violence on campus, but critics said it trampled the rights of the accused. The Trump administration will revamp the guidance through a rulemaking process that likely will take months, DeVos said, blasting the guidance for having weaponized the Office of Civil Rights to work against schools and against students. She said the administration will give all sides a chance to offer opinions on how it should move forward. Now, obviously the accused should have rights. They shouldn't be. The idea is innocent until proven guilty. Sometimes people are falsely accused. That does happen. There are some instances where that is true, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take allegations seriously. Just because the Rolling Stone article about UV was false doesn't mean that all sexual assault and rape cases on college campuses are false. I mean, you can't say that they're all false, and then you have frat guys on Yale and several other campuses going around saying no means yes and yes means anal. That's just not how logic works. So I am concerned with this. So are a lot of women advocacy groups. There are some accused advocacy groups that are happy about this. And again, I understand they felt that there was a change in the process. The level of need for guilt was lowered, and that, I understand, can be a bit of an issue. It went from about 75% to just over 50% proof of guilt. There does need to be a happy medium, although personally I think if someone is accused of rape, it should immediately leave the campus and go to local police. Because a college campus isn't an entity unto its own with the ability to legally deal with criminal cases like that. It's just not something that's meant for that. It's a learning institution. That's just my personal opinion, but I think there does need to be a discussion and open dialogue with all parties involved, but I don't think that scrapping the directive is the good idea. When something's broken, you don't scrap it and get a new thing. You fix it, unless it's beyond like if I were to have damage done to my car and it's hard to open the door, I don't then get rid of the car and get a new one. I go to the body shop and get it fixed. I go to the mechanic and get it fixed. It's not an exact parallel, but it fulfills the purpose of, we need to fix it, we don't need to destroy it. Finally, ending, Advocates for survivors of sexual assault said they felt they were given the short shrift and noted that research has shown false claims of rape are rare. They said DeVos had indicated she would hold similar listening sessions in other parts of the country before making a decision. Giving them just one meeting with the secretary feels a little bit like playing lip service to the importance of having survivors in the room, said Jess Davidson, managing director of End Rape on Campus. Now, I would suggest calling your congressmen and senators, especially those who are on the committees that deal with education, and trying to get them involved as best as possible to advocate for something similar to the Obama directive, but not exactly the same. Like I said, there should be a happy medium between level of proof and the amount of proof to prove guilt, and its level within the letter of the law or whatever, and also changing policies on campus so that it is impartial. Part of the Title IX, part of the directive was getting someone who is a Title IX coordinator. I think that's a good idea, but I think that the number of Title IX coordinators should correspond to the size of the school, and that they should only have Title IX as the directive, not be like a faculty member or a Title IX director who also happens to be dean in the school administration. Just someone who's exclusively Title IX coordinator. That'd be my suggestion. Call your Congress people and senators. Say, hey, please try to work with DeVos to get something set up so that we can have safe campuses, or maybe introduce legislation to help the process along to create safer campuses. I don't know what the solution is. All I know is that scrapping is not the best choice at the moment. So yeah, that's the stories for the week. And again, those who are in the path of Hurricane Irma, please be safe. Please get to safety. On top of that, Hurricane Jose could very well follow the same path. So please be careful. This is Josh with Cultural Catholic signing off.